おはよう皆様。今日は新しいプロジェクト。けど、僕の声はダメ。英語の声を使う。
So let's go with this voice and see where it goes. I am Melania Malas, freelance animancer, a term I will insist on using over the outright offensive necromancer. I am on the verge of groundbreaking discovery in my field, and within this journal, I shall document my progress towards it. Through a recent experiment from the basement of my father's inn, I have discovered a hitherto unknown animatic construct. Background animus, omnipresent miasma of spiritual energy, largely made up of deceased plants and insects, can be concentrated and infused throughout a liquid medium via a careful combination of my own self-designed runes and tonics. The resulting constructs, which I have named mollusids, are viscous organisms of incredible strength and resilience, whilst also suggesting much stronger intellects than typical background animus constructs. Even the mollusids constructed from the meager background animus levels within the inn's basement, reaching around 2 to 3 nanocuticus on a good day, have shown extremely promising results. The potential of these creatures cannot be understated. Physical labor could be supplanted entirely, freeing the human body and soul to pursue higher passions. The way in which we live our lives would be revolutionized. The cruel stigmas surrounding the animatic arts would melt away overnight. A golden age would be born, and the bitter fossils at the Ministry of Magic could only whine and naysay about black magic into deaf ears, until they too are forgotten as antiquated relics of unenlightened times. I apologize for indulging in my fantasy there. To further my experiments and realize my vision, must seek out a source of high background animus. My research has identified an ideal site for this. Between the village of Krojanstadt and the Palopos foothills lie an underground complex of immense spiritual energy, populated by strange beasts unseen anywhere else. At its heart is an artifact of immense animatic power, constantly radiating animus. I have set out on an expedition to obtain this object. I write these words from my base camp at the cave's edge. Even here, background animus is intense, fluctuating around 50 nanoq. Even with my experience in martial spellcasting, being perpetually hunted by the ministry does impart some valuable life skills. Entering the unknown on my own would be suicidal. Instead, I have constructed a mollusid to take my place. A roughly humanoid form, capable of self-defense should the worst occur. Most importantly, it is disposable, even if it should perish. I have ample resources at hand to create more. I admit, the design is not currently in the best shape. I had planned to make some improvements to its abilities on the trip here, but I am truthfully far too hungry to focus on resolving the animatic equations at the moment. I could fit few rations amongst the animatic equipment in my cargo, and the most edible of those had been stolen overnight. From the deep set, goblin tracks around by campsite that day surmised that I had been yet another victim of Big Bertha, whom's daring raids on Krojanstadt's pantries have made them something of a local celebrity. Regardless, the current design is the best I have to work with. I will conjure this mollusid from nearby river water, and it will follow its insect command to seek out objects of high animatic energy and return them to me. It will set off down the cavern to do so, and I will await its return from the safety of base camp. And with death comes entry too. I have to confess some feelings I have towards the mollusids. The humanoid shape I gave them was something I never put too much thought into, merely the first and most seemingly sensible body type to come to mind. At least, that's one rationalization of it. Today, as I conjured yet another to search the cavern, something seemed different. After it dragged itself out of the tank and off towards the cave, looked over its shoulder back towards me. It stood there for a brief moment, the glistening curves of its body silhouetted against the morning sun. I must admit that it has been almost a week since I have had any human contact, not to mention the effect that heat stroke can have on the senses. But I can swear on my life that it winked at me before disappearing into the depths. Mollusids are constructs of background animus. There's nothing inside their heads except for the lingering spirits of a million dead beetles, so weak in consciousness that they can only be held together by psionic tincture and multidimensional Fosdy manifolds. These feelings are self-evidently ridiculous, nothing more than an effect of the social isolation this lone journey necessitates. And yet, YC, back again, with entry 3. It is a perpetual struggle to occupy myself here. After conjuring the daily mollusid for its expedition, there is very little to make myself busy with. I am still iterating on the mollusid's designs, but it is difficult to focus on drawing out rune sketches and cork stem diagrams for hours a day, and I find myself frequently distracted. Often, when my inspiration for animancy runs dry, I will simply sit down with one of my jars and drink from it, savoring its myriad flavors on my tongue. The exact palette and profile of each mollusid is distinctly different, and I like to preserve smaller portions of the more interesting flavors over several days. These smaller meals occasionally even re-grant me inspiration for my designs, but my focus inevitably fades soon afterwards. I still hold some concern for the substance's effects on my body. I am now confident that it is potable, but its effects on my waistline have become undeniable. The handful of clothes I brought with me are struggling to keep fastened around their buttons. Though worrying, the perpetual hugging sensation is oddly comforting and helps me maintain good posture while I sit over my work table. We go again, entry 4. I had an encounter with Big Bertha today, the previously mentioned food thief, now infamous among the local bakers. As I returned to my tent after a brief walk to stretch my legs, I caught her scratching at the lid of a jar of mollusid. She was a strange sight, to be certain. She was around 2 feet shorter than me, but easily twice the weight. That breadth gave her a surprising deal of strength to throw around, which she made good use of in the ensuing scuffle. Eventually, she slipped out of the tent and back into the woods, but dropped the jar in the chaos. I have a feeling she won't try that one again. After all, it's not worth it for what she probably thinks is just jam. Okay, round 5. Let's go. I finally ran out of empty jars. I've been slowly running out since I arrived, but now there's simply nowhere else to put the surplus. From now on, I'll have to make even further use of it. After all, I can't just dump these experimental compounds into the environment. I've already gotten a head start on clearing out the supply. I've been regularly snacking on the smaller jars for some time now. The extra main meal I've subconsciously created between dinner and lunch will do its part too. I'm well aware of the side effects, of course. My newfound belly now peeks out the bottom of many of my shirts, and I've found myself frequently having to loosen my belt, lest it dig even further into my hips. Again, part 6. I snapped a button on my favorite shirt today. As I sat down with the day's 5th jar, in my defense, 3 had been fairly small, I suddenly heard a subtle clattering across the tent and felt my unrestrained stomach slap down onto my lap. The impact brought a strange feeling, sending ripples across my thighs and chest. I lifted my belly from underneath and once again dropped it. My whole body shook with the motion, waves of suiting across my rolls and curves. I had known that I was getting bigger, but until then, I had never truly felt it. I spent a while longer exploring my newfound shape, grabbing and pulling at the pillowy mass that was growing around me. Every experimental prod and jiggle felt captivating, and I was only drawn away from the trance I brought myself into by the prospect of the day's 6th jar. Though I am, of course, focused on my mission, I think I am allowed to enjoy myself every now and then. Another one, entry 7. The sunset was deep and golden when the mollusid returned from its daily trek. I had just been particularly indulgent with 2 larger jars, and I was laying sideways, cradling my taut stomach. Its rounded body gleamed in the evening light, rippling back and forth as it made its way towards me. Usually, the mollusids simply put their arm up to my mouth and wait expectantly to be consumed. To my surprise, however, as one lay down on the ground beside me, our faces a foot apart. I put one hand to my shoulder, the other under my cheek, and looked into my eyes. The sheer size and presence of the body before me, glistening in the sun, made me feel an emotion I could no longer hide. I brought my own arms around it and my mouth to its own. I held here tight against me and drank without restraint or remorse. The moment could have lasted minutes. It could have lasted hours. Eventually, I was exhausted from the exertion of passion, and I went trough the usual procedures of disanimating and jarring. I have a feeling that today's jars I will be preserving for a very long time. Another one. Entry number 8. My point of contact with the mollusids has officially shifted from the arm to the face. Tonight, I was once again approached more intimately. As the sheer mass of her immense body loomed over me, the passion of an unknowable consciousness clear in its eyes, I could not resist the offer. However, she had another surprise in store this evening. As my stomach was filled taut, and I prepared to begrudgingly cut the moment short with the bottling procedure, Mollusid put her hand on my shoulder, gently pushed me aside, and began to bottle itself. This event has some startling implications. I had a theory far back when this technology was but a handful of sketches in my notebook, that periods of repeated conjuration and disanimation could slowly concentrate a consciousness within the construct, stronger than the million trace spirits that compose it, and capable of persisting without a body for several hours. Seems to be the only possible explanation for its capacity to learn, and quite possibly how she has had the time to desire and pursue these certain modes of interaction with me. Therefore, my mollusids have not at all been separate construct, each only guided by a million floral ghosts and a handful of runes, but a single complex and persistent consciousness. It only seems right to grant her a name, despite her current incapacity for language. I've settled on Ambrosia, and I eagerly look forward to when I next see her tomorrow. Entry number 9. I must confess that the isolation of this locale is beginning to affect me, and my meetings with Ambrosia only intensify the loneliness at every other hour of the day. The jars help drown out these afflictions for a while, but cannot completely eject them. To help alleviate this, I've devised another experiment. According to my calculations, it should be possible to split a part of Ambrosia's artificial consciousness into another container, one that could remain with me on the surface. I've prepared a setup to attempt this. If successful, I will have created yet another mollicid with a shared, or at least similar, mind. The procedure holds little risk, but I must confess some slight worry for experimenting on Ambrosia in this manner. If anything were to go wrong, I only hope that she could find it within herself to forgive me. Tree number 10. The procedure went without complications, to my unending relief. When the mollicids met this morning, they seemed surprised by but amicable towards each other, suggesting the new construct to be a similar, but not shared, consciousness. This new mollicid, which I have named Syrup, shall remain with me indefinitely on the surface. She is a curious soul, constantly staring and prodding at the world around her with fascination, frequently looks over my shoulder while I write in my notebooks, and seems eager to help with whatever I may be doing, despite how little she comprehends the task at hand. So far, she has learnt how to briefly hold various animatic equipment in place, and is still coming to grips with the intricacies of unsealing mason jars. I am glad to have found a less transient companion, as much as I hold Ambrosia dear. Tree number 11. When your thoughts are so consumed by multivariable animatic equations and Kantsman manifolds, among other things, it is easy to gloss over the simpler optimizations you can make to your own schedule. Today, as Ambrosia once again returned from down under and approached me, she did not come down to my laying body like usual, but instead walked straight past and into my tent. Surprised and indignant, I rose to my feet, an act which has become increasingly straining and difficult lately, and followed her in. She was busy filling up jars with herself, cleanly and efficiently. She was sealing the last as I came in, just as I prepared to demand answers, perhaps not a very lucrative endeavor in hindsight. She smiled and put a finger against my lips. The taste upon my mouth quickly calmed me. In that hazed moment, she put her arm around my shoulder and led me to my mattress. We both laid down upon it, and the night continued almost as normal. It had been a while since I could have drank every last bit of her, and I relished the sensation of the final mouthful. This, I must admit, was a far more pleasurable order of operations for our nightly rendezvous, and is yet another thing I am deeply grateful to Ambrosia for. Tree number 12. Syrup has finally learnt how to feed me. With a simple gesture towards the storage table, she will unseal a jar and bring it beside me, pouring it into my mouth whenever I bring my head up from my notebook and to the jar. Now, not even the inconvenience of rising from my seat is a barrier to eating. I can spend hours there without rising, adding the occasional note to my designs in between jars. After all, I'm approaching the limit of what I can accomplish with the resources at hand. I shouldn't overexert myself chasing after marginal performance gains. Tree number 13. Today, as Syrup brought me another jar, she stood much closer than normal. As I drank from it as usual, she extended her other arm towards my side and gently squeezed a handful of my soft flesh. I was surprised, but much too busy taking in Ambrosia's flavors to object. I continued to swallow as she explored further, stroking and grabbing at my body wherever she pleased. The sensation felt exhilarating. I felt slightly disappointed when the jar ran empty, prompting her to move away and obtain another. Thankfully, she would repeat this activity several more times throughout the day, each time becoming more confident and assertive in where her hands would go. This is likely a mannerism that she's observed and copied from Ambrosia, and I have been pleasantly surprised by this example of mimetic interchange. Tree number 14. I can wear none of my clothes anymore. They haven't fit for a long time, but they could at very least still be secured onto my body. This morning, I could fasten the first button on my loosest shirt for a total of 3 seconds before it snapped clean off. My thick black work trousers have torn beyond repair down the sides, and the less said about the bra, the better. I have no real choice but to abandon the concept of wearing clothes altogether. Thankfully, I do not mind. There is nobody around I must protect my modesty to, and the lack of layers helps immensely against fending off heat exhaustion. Besides, they had all become filthy with dried slime. Tree number 15. The stool beside my work table has been making concerning noises for a while now, but I would have never dared to imagine what has happened today. Midway through a particularly large jar, 2 of its legs snapped clean off, and I collapsed onto the floor. Though certain recent changes to my own physiology may have played a minor part, the seat was far past its prime, and I have had my suspicions that the glue was rotten for a while now. I trialed a handful of crates, sacks, and larger pieces of animatic equipment as replacements, but they all felt much too uncomfortable for my exposed backside. From now on, I have no choice but to work from on top of my mattress. Tree number 16. Keeping pace with Ambrosia's supply has become a full-time job. I don't even have meals to speak of anymore, all throughout the day. Syrup feeds me a near constant flow of the jars. I scarcely go an hour anymore without a taste of ambrosia, if even that. The effort involved in this task makes it difficult to focus on anything else. Whilst I write in my notebook, I feel the constant urge to get back to work on emptying stock. I rarely manage to work on both simultaneously. Tree number 17. Today, whilst reconjuring ambrosia, I caught a glimpse of my reflection in the liquid of the tank. I briefly stopped the process to recatch that glimpse and confirm that it had not been somehow horizontally stretched. I could scarcely believe what I saw. I was massive. There was no denying that now. I was easily over double the width I was just 3 weeks ago. Every part of my body had become caked in a layer of thick, pillowy fat. My face to my chest, to my arms to my belly, already taut with the contents of 3 large jars. I experimentally brought my plump fingers to my stomach and found I could press them inches deep. When I withdrew them, the motion sent faint ripples all over my body. I was completely absorbed by the image. I only brought myself away when I had to stop Syrup from continuing the conjuration procedure herself, almost breaking a valve in the process. Tree number 18. The experience I had in the reflection of the tank yesterday had made me wonder, how much bigger would I appear had not just had only 3 jars? Today, I attempted to pursue this line of inquiry. Through all the willpower I could muster, I restrained myself to only 6 jars until evening. The lack of empty jars made Ambrosia noticeably larger than usual during our daily activity, and after that had concluded, I set to work. Syrup, my request, brought me jar after jar after jar. I focused wholly on the effort of drinking, pushing myself to pack as much as possible into my stomach as quickly as possible. It must have been far past midnight when I had finished, all but 4 jars craped empty. It was here that an unfortunate contingency suddenly introduced itself into my plan. I could not bring myself up from my mattress, for how heavy I had become. Syrup thankfully obliged to push me onto my feet and steady my bloated body while I slowly waddled to the tank. The image I saw in the reflection was everything I had hoped. Whereas yesterday my belly merely spilled out onto my thighs, now its firm and nice spherical shape loomed above them. Every movement me and Syrup made to balance myself upright made it have a shake, releasing a thick groan. The sight was utterly euphoric. I am writing these words the morning after, for I could scarcely think trough the haze of my own tiredness and satisfaction. Tree number 19. Yesterday's experiment, though utterly successful, has left me with only 4 jars for today's food. I unthinkingly consumed the first two soon after waking, and only remembered the scarcity of the supply halfway through the third. In an immense exertion of self-control, I avoided eating the remainder and attempted to search my surroundings for any other edible items. It was not a successful search. It's become so much harder to keep myself standing for this long, especially when I am so used to maneuvering a body a third of the size of this one. I could not bear to go without a meal for so long, and I let myself have a measly single jar for lunch. I searched for several more hours until I hit a jackpot. Within the recesses of my luggage were 2 home-baked cupcakes, a gift from my grandmother for the journey. Desperate, I took a heaped bite out of the first, then immediately spit it out. I had always thought my grandmother's cakes were far too generous with the sugar and icing, but this one tasted like a mouthful of potash. I tried a bit from the other cupcake, but it was just as bitter. I needed my final half jar just to wash the taste from my mouth. I knew that they hadn't gone stale. My grandmother's cakes could have kept for months, as Ambrosia truly had this stark of an effect on my palate. I was left without Ambrosia for 6 agonizing hours after that incident. When she finally returned, I had no choice but to indulge deeply in her taste, to quench my overwhelming hunger. Entry number 20. Syrup has, miraculously, learned how to carry out the conjuration process herself. She has often attempted to join in each morning, and I frequently had to restrict her help to holding various tools for me, as well as jars of ambrosia, of course. However, I was curious this morning to see if her help could be more in-depth, and under my supervision, I allowed her to carry out the process on her own. To my surprise, she did so perfectly, even faster speed and precision than I could manage. In the future, I trust her to carry out this morning ritual alone. I can now focus wholly on consuming our stock of jars throughout the day and making my final touches to Ambrosia's bodies. I admit that there isn't much more work to be done on the latter, and that I will be focusing most of my daily routine on the former. Entry number 21. This morning, I had an idea for one final invention. A pipe and funnel apparatus to make the consumption of ambrosia smoother and less messy than from a jar's lid. By far the most difficult part of the creation was getting onto my feet. It took all the strength me and syrup could muster, along with several false starts, to finally rock me onto my feet. Even after getting up, the exertion of movement felt immense. Syrup was constantly leaning against my body to help balance it. I searched my work table, now visibly gathering dust, for a funnel and spare length of rubber hosing, then tied them together, fastened the funnel to one of the tent poles beside my mattress. As soon as it was secured, I couldn't take the exertion anymore and collapsed back onto my bed with a heavy sigh. Syrup quickly picked up on how to operate this new equipment and graciously used it to feed me an extra-large helping of ambrosia. I am pleased to report that the system works as intended. Entry 22. I did not rise from my bed even once today. I'm not sure if I can anymore. Even shifting around on my mattress exhausts me from the effort of hauling hundreds of pounds of weight. From dawn until dusk, I could only lay here, constantly drinking from the hose. Syrup, having her feeding responsibilities streamlined by the funnel, has taken to idly playing with my body, prodding and grabbing at my perpetually bloated stomach. I can scarcely believe what I've become. All I can do now is eat more and more, each and every minute of every day. And yet, I feel no shame. All I could ever want now is more of ambrosia. Even now, as I write these words, I feel as if I am only wasting time, valuable energy, which could be spent on consuming even more. I'm so hungry. Entry 23. The page is empty, save for depression near the top left corner and a faint pink stain.